so much for showing up. I know it's the last session for the day, so I appreciate you all showing up here. My name is Pawan, as you were saying. I manage data science, data engineering for Quince. Quince is an e-commerce startup based out of San Francisco. We've got I wouldn't say large, but a smallish engineering team in Bangalore and Hyderabad. Right? So before I jump right into my session, I want to understand the audience a little better. I want to define, broadly at least define, what is a startup, because you get multiple definitions of that. So let's say, very loosely, if we say a company in existence, let's say for about 1 or 2 years and a headcount of at least 100 people, right? Let's say that's the loose definition of startup. How many of you all here are either working in that kind of a setup or have worked in a setup like that? Show of hands, please. Oh, nice. Beautiful. Okay. And for the others who didn't raise their hand, I would say use this as a session to understand what happens on the other side of the board. Okay. So with that, let's get started. So first, the big question. When we talk about a startup, the thing that comes to my mind is probably a bunch of guys and girls huddled up and then trying to solve a core problem, which, depending on the maturity of the startup, we don't even know if it will make it to the next 6 months or not, right? In that context, when we talk about a data engineering practice, it's heavily loaded. Who needs a practice when we don't even know if this idea is going to click or not? So what we'll do is to make this a little more contextual, I'll bring the persona of a startup, and then that story just flows along in the subsequent slides. So let's say I'm the CTO of a startup. This is probably a 50-member team at this stage, first year in existence. So if you step back and ask, what are the questions I will have? These are some of the questions, right? So if I'm a 50-member team in the first year of existence, the first question that comes to my mind is, even if I'm in a B2C space, do I have enough data volume? Do I need like a solid data engineering team? I can probably just load up the data in Excel or even dump it into a PostgreSQL. Right? So data volume obviously will be the first thing that will come on your mind. Team, it's probably a bunch of 5, 10, in this case 50 people just huddled up in a corner. What team are we talking about? Do I need a data architect? Do I need a team of data engineers? In fact, do I need an org itself representing the larger data team? Do I need data analysts? So when you're talking about questions like these, obviously tech stack is an important thing, because if I'm the CTO, I've started the company because I believe in a certain idea. Obviously, when it starts, it's a smaller idea, right? But then I know somewhere I have deep conviction that this idea is going to click, which means if I decide to build everything on a box right next to me, keep everything on-prem, will this really scale if a Pokemon Go kind of a moment happens where within 1 month you're seeing millions of downloads happening? Are you ready for that, right? So as a CTO, I need to ask those questions. So tech stack becomes a big deal for me. Tech stack would be largely, which cloud platform? Should it be AWS? Should it be Azure? So these are some standard questions running in my mind. This one is a big deal, because if you're bootstrapped, whatever dollars you have, you're probably trying to spend that on acquiring customers and not burning it on paying money to AWS and Azure and going with a heavily loaded stack. So while all these things are happening, I just touched on the scalability aspect. You also somewhere are thinking, I have to scale the business. Now what does scale mean? Any company, doesn't matter what product line, what the vision is, you need to have some visibility on how is this company performing. Let's say GMV as a top metric, right? Are you making money or not? So you need those insights, doesn't matter what the size of the company is. So if I have to sum up all of these things, it's a 50-member team, year 1 in existence, standard questions coming up in the mind of CTO, but this last one kind of solidifies the statement, because what we are now saying is, if I don't know if the company is performing well, am I making money, am I losing money, all these things is a moot point, because this insight layer is super critical. It's almost like, if I have to give you an analogy, say I'm heading out on a hike. There is no network, right? So I can't carry my mobile phone. What is the one thing that helps me? Probably some kind of a compass, which basically says head this is not. If you go back, that is south. This insight layer is largely that layer, which is, it could be the most rudimentary way of just pull data, write an Excel macro, it will throw you some number, but that will at least tell you, is your company heading in the right direction or not? Now if I ask the primary question, do I need a data engineering practice? At this maturity of a startup, we are absolutely not talking about like a giant practice, we are talking about something where you can put conviction and tell your business is heading in the right direction, right? So that insight, that general data management layer is what I'm calling as data practice. So if you ask my opinion, for sure you will need a data engineering practice. Now the scale, the way you mature the data engineering practice obviously will change with time. Doesn't matter if you're in month 1, year 10, you will need some kind of a compass, and the data and insights is largely the compass that's going to help you drive the company. Right, so in my current experience, prior stints in other startups, this is the cycle that I've seen where all these are valid questions. While these questions are relevant, if you don't know if you're heading in the right direction or not, the company, I'm sure, is going nowhere, right? So let's continue the story, right? So it's year 1. Obviously, let's assume that the business is doing well, which means I'm now slowly thinking, what will this company look year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Which means the practice of, let's say, it was just one person, we call that person as the data guy in the company, right? So from that stage, assuming that the company grows, how should the journey evolve? A big disclaimer, startups could be in different shapes, forms, various levels of maturity. Obviously, this is not a gold standard. This is something that I've come up with based on my prior experience. So if you're part of a company which kind of falls in the framework that I'm going to show you now, it probably would be somewhere in the mix of 2, 3 different spectrums that you're witnessing, right? So let's put some parameters on the table here. How do I measure the journey of a data engineering evolution for a company? I could come up with these standard parameters. I'm sure there could be more. So first, is there a data strategy? Day 1, no data strategy required, just survive, right? Just make sure that the company, the idea is valid and customers are buying into your idea. But then data strategy as a larger element, larger dimension becomes super relevant as you progress further. Architecture kind of largely aligns with the tech stack point that we were making. On day 1, you don't have data volumes. You don't need to think of a full-blown Lambda architecture. What you need is simple process to just start storing data. Build versus buy, classic CTO question. Should I go ahead and start buying products, or should I hire the smartest guys and girls on the planet and start building them up, building the solutions? Team and org. Day 1, do I need a team? Am I even looking at creating some kind of a structure around it? When I talk about team, I'm obviously talking about a larger data organization in the company. Framework largely is where should this data engineering practice evolve into some kind of a horizontal structure, or should I break this into pieces and plug them into individual verticals? Insights layer is the critical part that I was talking about, and if you're in the B2C space, this question will come up. Are you ready for the GDPRs and CCPAs of the world, right? So let's say this is the parameters and this is the framework, right? Now let's say what happens in the first year of the company. Probably the most important acronym in a startup's journey when it starts off is PMF, right? Do you have a product market fit or not? So coming back to my e-commerce startup that I'm running, first year of existence, let's see how the platform and the framework plays out. Data strategy doesn't matter. You just need a cost-effective way of ingesting data, putting it in a place, crunch some numbers, and get a directional sight of is this going north or going south. Architecture. My suggestion, keep it simple. It could be as simple as ability to, stand up a website, create a mobile app, whatever is the line of the business, right? Have the ability to get basic insights into how your business is working. That should take care of your architecture. Build versus buy. If I'm the CTO, and obviously it's a startup, I'm very cognizant of the cost angle to this, I would start with open source. Right? Tons of open source solutions, many of them are not the most mature solution, doesn't matter. Good enough to get you started instead of you sitting and starting with code line number 1. Trial versions are a beautiful hack, where in the classic build versus buy, as we call the Jugaad way here, you don't have to buy a licensed product. A lot of times what I've seen peers do in the industry also is explore a product, take 30, 60, 90-day trial versions. It's a beautiful hack because in the process of using that solution, you got something right off the bat, and then your business is also getting validated. Right? Is this the right tool? Forget the tool. Is this the right product for you to bet, and you got a trial version product ready for yourself? Team. This one is just a one-member team. Do not spend any more time hiring for more people. Obviously, you need to have a solid person here. Right? So this person is your analyst, data scientist, engineer, whatever you call this person. Or, doesn't matter. People are just trying to figure out PMF. You're not looking at an org. Framework, I would say, with a one-person team, it's largely central. Right? There is no point in trying to slice and dice. Insights, again, taking inspiration from the open source trial version. Pretty much what we've done in the company right now is use Excel, use open source, use Redash, use Grafana. The point is somewhere you should be able to populate and show your insights and take decisions based off of that. Data privacy security, like I said, in the B2C space, you cannot work around that. This is a strict no-no, right? So depending on which geography, what are the privacy rules, you will have to comply. Second stage of life. Somehow the company made it through year 1. You're in year 2 and 3. Here's what the industry calls the growth and profitability. Up till last year, till the bubble burst, everybody was like, just grow, grow, grow. But then obviously we are talking profitability. Doesn't matter if you're looking at the growth journey or the profitable journey, the maturity now starts increasing. The data strategy from a very simple, whatever it takes, just get the data in my opinion, should start moving to a data platform. When we talk about data platform, the standard 4Ds, start defining the data ownership. It is such a complicated situation when the company is growing, people are playing multiple roles, nobody knows who owns what data, inventory says, hey, I don't know, merchandising messed it up, merchandising says, I don't know, finance messed it up, but ultimately you got to do some reporting, right? Which means data ownership is a big deal. Data quality, the classic unsung hero of data engineering world. If you put garbage, you get garbage out, right? So that's the standard line. But while the company is scaling, while the practice is still ramping up, how do you still maintain data quality? Because that's obviously important. Data contract. So data contract, you're probably a little more matured in the curve, right? So probably between 2.5 to 3 years in that range. Because now you're getting to a point where you're talking to your engineering teams and saying, I need data in a certain format, and that's the contract we all need to abide by. The larger data governance point, which is lineage, metadata, cataloging, all of those things. So these things will start coming on the table, and it should at the right time, right? Because only then we are looking at a post-3-year horizon. Architecture, so look at the simple architecture, right? Where if I'm an e-com B2C company, I've got customers coming on the website. When I start off, as much as tracking I would like to have, I just want to track my orders. But then as the company matures, we're now talking about clickstream data flowing in from website, batch data flowing in from order system, trying to figure out which customer came on the website, what did they draw. So architecture is clearly mature. So we are getting into some kind of a hybrid mode there. Build versus buy. By now the company should have reached some kind of maturity where you figured out what will work for your company. It has to be a combo of some kind of a build versus buy. It would be stupidity if I say I'm going to build my own database. Snowflake, Databricks of the world are waiting there, fairly standard for a startup to use that out. But do I need to build solutions on top of that? And for that, do I need products? Do I need a licensed product? Is a larger question that most CTOs would face. So it's a combination. There is no prescribed method. It's a judgment call. The team starts maturing now, right? So in your second and third year, you need to add more people. Some kind of a hierarchy is now getting formed. You probably have some kind of an architect material in the team. This architect probably has got a bunch of SDs rolling up to this person. So the team definitely should have formed by that time, because your needs are more. If you're talking data platform, you need a slightly more structured team. Data org. This is interesting, because if you look at the larger data structure in an enterprise, what really happens is, at least from my experience, what I've seen is there's a data engineering team. There is a cousin, brother / sister in the form of a data science team for largely the predictive side of the world. On the other side, you've got the analyst team. Analysts largely bring in the domain experience, have a good Python SQL experience. So when we talk about data and when we are talking about the org of data in a company, these are the three larger entities. Of course, the next extension of that is some kind of a product team, and then there is DevOps. So all those things will start coming together. So my suggestion is some kind of an org needs to start forming by this stage. Otherwise, you will not be in a position to support your growth and scale beyond. Framework is hybrid. This is an interesting point. So what I've seen in my past experience is there are two ways to look at it. If you've got a data engineering team, the classic way of using this is these guys are the horizontal guys, right? So they create a platform, they define what are the best practices, what comes in, I will decide, what goes out, I'll guarantee the insights. That's a very horizontal way of looking at it, not a centralized way of looking at it. The challenge with this is you lose the vertical context, which is a marketing team could need a different kind of insights. It's dealing with clickstream data, but your logistics team is classic supply chain, traditional batch kind of a mode. The reality is somewhere in between. Again, nobody knows what is the right mix and nothing to prescribe for a larger group, but you'll have to figure this part out, where there needs to be some kind of a centralized team and some kind of an offshoot of that in the verticals where you're plugging in data engineers because they know the context of that business use case, while there are these data engineers in the platform who are defining the best practice of how the data platform should be built. So that's where the hybrid nature of that comes. Insights, clearly we've moved from a simple dashboard to a slightly more API-driven way, because by now your sources have increased, your consumers have increased, you absolutely need some kind of an API consumption layer so that the downstream applications can tap into and then start consuming the data. You probably are also looking at self-service by this stage, right? So where business users are and analysts are fairly tech-savvy, they are saying, hey, just load the data, give me some kind of a semantic layer and a dashboard on top of that, we'll figure that part out. So that's where that maturity happens. Privacy, security, I can take the example from my current company. So we have about million active customers in the database. The requests that come to us as we are scaling are, we are primarily operating in the US, so it's largely CCPA as a guidelines. Hey, I do not want any of my personally identifiable data in your database, right? And when you start off, you probably get just ones and probably tens of such requests. As you are scaling, hundreds and thousands of customers would ask for that. There is no way an engineer would sit and script it out and start running that thing. So you're looking at a slightly more matured stage where it's all fairly automated. We've just packaged it out, given it to our customer service team, there's a request, they know what to trigger, and then the obfuscation happens. So some kind of a maturity around that. This is the beautiful stage, right? Your PMF is done, you're clearly on some kind of a growth or a profitability path, and now you're talking scale. When you're talking scale, you're probably even crossed the startup stage at this time. You're kind of in a mid maturity level. Data strategy clearly should be forward-looking, because by now, you've probably expanded geographies, you have probably started new lines of business, you've acquired other companies, which means the data platform cannot be a straight fit jacket where I know what my business is as of today, and hence I'm going to only build it that way, right? So which means your strategy clearly should have evolved to where you want your business to be in the next 5 years, 10 years. Architecture, again, I can take references from my current company. So in an e-commerce play, what happens is, take your Amazons, Mintras, or any other e-com for that matter. Customers on the website, the best experience we can give to the customer is show the right content at the right time such that the customer is able to convert. Now, how do you make that magic happen? You obviously need to understand your customer's past behavior, make sure that the personalization kicks in, bunch of your data science, data engineering coming together. That's where you've reached a certain level of maturity and you're now talking enterprise standards. Build versus buy, again, the combo just continues. Team, clearly the team should have expanded. We're now talking at a 5+ member team. Org, clearly a mature data ops practice, because I didn't stress too much on the DevOps side of things, but all these things should kind of start coming together and start working in harmony. Framework, a more evolved framework where you're kind of looking at some kind of a horizontal versus vertical structure. Insights layer, again, like I was saying, it obviously has to be matured, and even from a data privacy security standpoint. So the intent of kind of putting this slide together was to just talk about, you could be at any of these stages. For example, you could be working for a company which is in a 3+ year, but your maturity could be, say, somewhere between a 1 and 2. So it could be any combination here, but think of this as a spectrum, right? So in some of the layers, you're probably far more matured, in some you're little less. But somewhere the reality is, all these things have to come together for this larger data or to mature. So what I thought I'll do is, given this is the framework, I thought I'll give a quick reference of how we started at Quince and where we are now, right? So I've been with the company for a year, and the company is, I think, in 3rd year right now. So clearly this is the architecture I inherited at some point. So think of the column number 1 when you're looking at this architecture. The company still is trying to figure out whether we survive or not, so nothing fancy, right? There are a bunch of sources which are pumping in data. Just create integrations. That's what we did. In Python, we knew from where to pull the data. MySQL was the only repository where all the data got done. Obviously, there were a few other integrations. I'm simplifying this a bit here. The consumption layer was just a redash from a dashboarding standpoint, and data analysis, basically Google Sheet. Right? So, a very simplified way of looking at things. Again, from a larger layout standpoint, one data engineer, definitely not a team, because we don't even know if we could hire and afford to hire a team at that point. this is kind of where we are today. Again, slightly simplified version of the truth. What has happened is the number of sources have increased. What could be some typical sources? Sources could be customer service, right? When you're dealing with 1 million customers, you obviously need some kind of a ticketing system, which means we've got a customer service enabled source. People go on the website, they kind of start writing reviews about your products, whatnot, so there needs to be some way to capture that. Marketing is just exploding. Us being an e-commerce company, we don't have a brick and mortar presence, which means customers can only discover us on website, right? So marketing has its own sources. So think of the sources getting expanded. Again, we are going with a Python-based integration at this time. 2 streams have emerged. Kafka largely for the website streaming data, just to get a sense of in near real-time way what customers are doing and how can we kind of target them better. The batch data is far more mature now. OLTP still continues to be in MySQL. You're using Fivetran for some data transfer operations, but the lakehouse architecture is now evolving on Snowflake, right? So now, if you relate to the previous slide, you're somewhere between the second and the third pillar, where clearly we are on path to build our own data platform. Again, the build versus buy reference, if I have to bring that back. We did evaluate collaboration, all of those things for data governance. Right? So our ultimate call was, and in fact, CDP is a big deal for us. Right? So marketing absolutely needs to understand the customer data. So the path we took was, we spoke to 3 different vendors on the CDP side, all the standard ones, Segment, Amperity, Bloomreach, all of those things. What we realized was, at our stage of maturity, if we go with the off-the-shelf product, we have no idea what they do inside their platform. Right? Yes, they ingest data, they'll give us golden source of truth as the claim. But at this stage of our evolution, we want to own our data. So the decision was taken that we are going to build our customer data platform on Snowflake. It will probably be a slightly difficult journey because that will be a build option that we are taking. But the decision taken at this stage is 2023, we build our homegrown customer data platform. We will figure out the nuances. That will help us to go get the right CDP at a future stage if required. Because unless we travel this journey, we wouldn't know what landmines would exist. Right? So Lakehouse basically is Snowflake. Clearly we've got a Redis now, a bunch of in-memory processing happening. Looker has come up as the dashboard layer. Fairly happy with the way Looker is performing. Data analysis still, Google Sheets still heavily used in the company. And that API consumption layer is exploding now, considering the downstream applications that we have. This is more of a horizontal across Datadog for a bunch of monitoring. If I go back to the reference of data quality and other integrations, again, we looked at various other tools for data quality and largely data integrations. What we realized was, we are at that stage of a startup's journey where the house is definitely not in order. So if we bring in an off-the-shelf product to fix our data quality problem, we may end up either just bending over backwards to make that work, or it will probably just not work for us. So a conscious decision was taken that we'll build a Python-based in-house data quality tool. Again, we'll take the call next year to see if it makes sense to move ahead. We are exploring Data Hub as the open source solution for data governance. Airflow is the orchestrator right now. I've even thrown in Jira because we didn't talk about that, but as we mature, clearly we have to understand that there needs to be some method to the madness. Work cannot just come up on the fly and then expect that the work will also get delivered. So there's more project management as a larger wrapper coming up in the organization, so Jira Confluence for that. And we're largely on AWS at this point, from a cloud platform standpoint. Right? So the classic, how it started, how it's going is kind of at this stage right now. To give you some numbers, right? What started as a 1-member data engineering team is about 5 people now. So I've got about 4 or 5 data engineers, 4 or 5 data scientists in the team, actively looking for data analysts because we realize that's a crucial leg in this tripod where without that analyst layer, a lot of things are falling between the cracks. Data volumes are good. That's what the business is also doing okay, doing good. Like I was saying, we're looking at close to 1 million customers, about 3 million user sessions per month. So the data is clearly exploding. Right? So it looks like the architecture is heading in the right direction, the data engineering practice is heading in the right direction. The standard KRAs that we use to measure are, we have a weekly numbers review metric where all the users come together. We face the standard challenge of users adopting. When we got a small company, everybody got used to Google Sheets and Excels of the world. So it's a nightmare trying to get users from that world to a slightly more different world, which will be in Looker and other services, right? Standard problem, I'm sure most of you here would be facing that. But the larger point is, how many times are issues reported by business users in those weekly meetings, and how many of them are related to data issues is the larger metric that my KRA is getting measured at. If I'm able to reduce the noise, that means indirectly it says that the house is in order and data engineering is able to handle the scale and supporting the business to a good extent. Yeah? So that's largely what I wanted to share with you all. Right? So happy to take questions.